So about 20 years ago, I met a guy, we'll call him Jimmy, who owned a fish and chip shop in Melbourne's eastern suburbs in the Mitcham area. Now, I've been going to Jimmy's shop for about 18 months at the time. And I was in one night, he said to me, he goes, "Hey Pete," he goes, "you do flood remediation, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Could you come upstairs and just have a quick look?" So while the food was cooking, followed him upstairs and had a look. It wasn't a very big job. Gave him a quote. He said, "Mate, could you start tomorrow morning about 8 o'clock before the shop opens?" No worries. So anyway, when I was actually going up, I noticed a brand new Lexus, I think it was an LS430, fully loaded, just sitting in there. Anyway, next morning I come round, did the job, took about 90 minutes, and Jimmy, being Greek background, said to me, he goes, "Hey, do you want some Greek coffee and buxamuthi," which is like a Greek type of biscuit? I go, "No worries, mate." So we sat down and we just started talking, and I said to him, I go, "Jimmy, I got to ask you," I goes, "whose Lexus is it in the back?" And he goes, "Oh, that's mine." And you see, I've only ever seen Jimmy driving around in an old Kingswood station wagon. And I mentioned that to him. He goes, "Look," he goes, "I just throw stock in the back of that." He goes, "The other thing is, if people see you in a nice car, they think you're charging too much, and, you know, they can cause issues." So he flies under the radar. Anyway, I said, "So your fish and chip shop must be doing good." He goes, "Mate, I didn't buy it from the fish and chip shop." He goes, "I bought it from the money I make out of real estate." I said to him, "Real estate? What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, as a teenager, I was always interested in real estate." He had an uncle, Stav, who owned a milk bar. He goes, "Look, Uncle Stav," or Theo Stav as he would have said, owned a milk bar, I think it was in the Middle Park area. He was illiterate. He goes, but the guy understood numbers, and he owned a bunch of properties. He goes, 3 or 4 going by memory. And he goes, so I worked with him after school. And he said, one thing he said to him, "Jimmy, is you've got to buy real estate. You've got to get into it." And so he was really influenced by this uncle. And so he decided at high school to do accounting, business studies, and I think marketing. So he didn't go to uni, that's what he did. And he thought to himself, how do I get into property? So he left his uncle's milk bar and started working after hours in a fish and chip shop. And he goes, the business was doing great. He goes, but they didn't have good stock control. He goes, and their marketing was very average. And he goes, but there was good cash flow every single night. So what he decided to do, and it was his business plan, was find a fish and chip shop somewhere and take over. And, you know, before he was 20, I think he said he did. So on that journey, he painted it, made this old Thai shop look amazing, created a really good menu of product, and just went about starting business. And, you know, business had picked up. He did a few little things in there, and he said in about 18 months, he goes, we'd nearly tripled turnover, and he goes, profit was up. He goes, but we kept hitting a ceiling because in the area there was a few other fish and chip shops, and was basically everything was price led. So he goes, what I did, my first property investment in his early 20s was a 2-bedroom apartment, 1960s apartment. I think he said in the Elwood area or Middle Park or something like that. He goes, so I bought it. He had a 50% deposit, and he goes, that was good. He goes, and then what happened was I went to go buy another one within 12 months, and he goes, he couldn't do it. He said because his turnover and profit wasn't enough. He had a liability because of the loan. Now, mind you, he hadn't had any advice on property from, you know, advocates or anything. And he goes, so I was stuck. He goes, I didn't want to be stuck at one property. He goes, so I looked at my business, changed the business plan, and he goes, I was in a competitive market. So he goes, I changed the product. I had a crossover period where you could buy the standard stuff or this really good stuff that was significantly more. And he said within a month, he goes, everyone just wanted the better stuff, and that's all he did. So now his turnover had increased significantly, his profit margin had gone through the roof, and within 18 months or 2 years he had bought into a commercial property, had an opportunity, and he did it. And this is all without training. So he kept growing his businesses, his turnover, kept refining his business plan, and was buying more and more property. And so, that's what he'd done. And he said, I own significant holdings in residential in all good areas. He said, I own some commercial, and I think he said industrial, but I still remember there was 3 categories. And he said, you see, this fish and chip shop, which was now in the eastern suburbs of Mitcham, he said, is the goose that lays the golden cash egg. He said, on its own, this business won't make me rich. He goes, but it does provide the turnover consistently that allows me to keep growing my property business. And at that stage, so we're talking over 20 years ago, it was more than $10 million. He said that confidentially. I don't know where Jimmy is now, if he's even alive, but I can share the story now. And it was a really good lesson in that he said that the Lexus wasn't bought with the cash from his fish and chip shop. It was built on the profits of property, and he paid for the Lexus in cash. And it was a really good lesson to me in that if you invest in business and your time in what you're actually good at, that you can find assets that will help you become wealthy independently in a whole other area. It was a very different story from anything I'd ever heard before. So there we go. Fish and chip shop owner to property tycoon.